Joseph Captain was born July 29th, 1934 in western Pennsylvania. He had a mother named Stella, a father named Joseph Captain, and an older sister named Frances. He then enrolled when he was 18 years old to Penn State University. There was then a draft in the 1950s that he was excused from because of his attendance at Penn State. After graduating, he then joined the Navy at age of 22 and left western Pennsylvania and went to Newport, Rhode Island for basic training. Mr. Captain explained how when he first went into the U.S. Navy, he was nervous.
Oh, yes, I was quite nervous. I had applied for, during that period of time, it was a mandatory draft, but I was excused from the draft because I was attending college at Penn State University. But after graduation, I would have had to serve in the Army. Instead, I chose to apply for a commission in the United States Navy and was accepted.
Mr. Captain spent a few months here and was only at port for a few before leaving for a new base in Florida. His port was called Mayport and is still used today for ships and naval purposes. Here he went through more specialized training and learned mostly about supply management. He learned to use guns on the ship and to command the top of the ship where some of the big machine guns were.
Mr. Captain was stationed on a destroyer called the William C. Law, or as some sailors called it, the William C. The captain of the William C. was named Elton Summerall, and he was described as a salty captain by Mr. Captain. I asked Mr. Captain about Elton and about his friends in the Navy.
Did you make any friends in your early days of service?
Oh yes, many friends. I still remember them and serving with them aboard ship, particularly because you're living in very close quarters and you're spend a lot of time with them.
He also described his living quarters.
Oh, our living quarters were tiny. Bunks. The officers had a choice. Mine was in the bow of the ship, below deck, and it bounced around pretty good.
Soon after arriving in Mayport, Mr. Captain went to the Willie C. He describes his living conditions as tight and small. Unlike many would think, he did describe the food very good. Mr. Captain made many friends at sea. He said they were the ones that kept him from a depressing and a boring time at sea. Unlike many of Mr. Captain's friends, he did not get seasick and was very fortunate. As Mr. Captain's time in the Navy went on, he visited many places along the East Coast and in the Caribbean. After a few years in the Navy, Mr. Captain was invited to become a member of the U.S. Navy Honor Guard, which hosts funerals and special Navy events.
One story Mr. Captain always talks about is how he and the other 99 members of the Honor Guard were inspected by JFK in action of protecting African Americans and their rights. He wanted 13 African American Honor Guard members for 13% of the U.S. population being African American. During this time in Washington, D.C., Joseph Captain got married to his current-day wife, Carol Ruffing, who is now Carol Captain. After all Mr. Captain's service, he moved to Newcastle, Delaware, and had 4 kids. He worked at DuPont, which is a chemical company. He then moved to Wilmington, Delaware, where his 4 kids grew up and where he retired. After living in Wilmington for around 40 years, Mr. Captain and Carol moved to Jenner's Pond, Pennsylvania, where they now live today.
Mr. Captain lived a very diverse life, traveling from many different places around the world. For DuPont, he traveled to Argentina and would go on business trips once a month or so. He lived in Pittsburgh, PA, Wilmington, Delaware, and Glassport, PA. Also, as a kid, he had many hobbies, including baseball. Some of his favorite places to go include Lewis, Delaware, and Naples, Florida. This is about Mr. Captain and his favorite places to go and where he lived.
Mr. Captain has had many great experiences in his lifetime, growing up in western Pennsylvania, leaving for the Navy at the age of 22, then meeting his wife, Carol, in Washington, D.C., and getting married. Next, moving into Williamton, Delaware, and starting a family. Last, moving to Generous Pond, Pennsylvania, and starting a new life with his new neighbors and community. This was the life story of Mr. Joseph F. Captain Jr.